Hi guys, good morning. Hello everyone. Good morning from Ireland. Good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. I hope that everything is working well. I just want to check my phone, just make sure everything is working. Yeah, so it seems like it's working from my phone, but please let me know if it's not, and I'll see what I can do here. But thank you so much again for being here. My name is Samanta Alves. I am one of the volunteers in the Spiritist Center of Ireland, and I'm part of the Spiritist Irish Federation. We are here this morning to talk about loving our enemies, and um, and I hope you guys enjoy the talk. And before we start, I just want, as always, if you guys could just give me a thumbs up, just so I know it's working on my phone, but I just want to make sure it's working for all of you guys. So please just give me a sign here before we do our initial prayer. I just want to start with our initial prayer as soon as we are ready. So, cool. I can see some likes here, which is good. Thank you so much, guys. Okay, so I think we're good to start. We're good to go. If you have any problems during the talk, let me know. And if you have any questions or if you want to make a comment, please use the chat box, and I have visibility of it, and we can talk about we can have kind of a conversation. So thank you so much. Stephanie's saying that my picture is frozen. Okay. Is it frozen for everybody? So if you guys could just let me know if it's frozen for everybody, or it seems okay for me here. But let me see if there's anything else I can do here. Okay, so I will continue, and if you guys can just let me know. Seems okay for me. Okay, perfect. So Stephanie, if you want to reinitiate it, it might work, but let me know if you still have problems. So let's do our initial prayer. Let's close our eyes. If you guys are comfortable to close your eyes, but if not, just raise your thoughts to Jesus, to our spiritual friends, to our mentors, to God. Let's thank them for this wonderful morning, for the beauty of being alive, for all the opportunities that we have here on earth, for the opportunity to have this conversation this morning, to learn more about what God wants us to learn, to understand a little bit more about what Jesus wants us to learn, or wanted us to learn when during his passage here on earth. Let's open our hearts and our ears to everything that they want to talk to us about. And let's use this study this morning to improve ourselves, to become a little bit better, and to create an atmosphere for better relationships, not only with our friends, but also with our so-called enemies. Guide us during this morning, dear God, dear Jesus, dear spiritual friends, so we can go the route you want us to go. So be it. Cool. So I'll share my screen. I prepared some slides here. Okay. I think you can see my screen well, but again, let me know if any problems. So a few weeks ago, we talked about the value of a friend, and we talk about how the bonds of friendship come about, why they come apart, when they come apart, how to deal with the challenges in a friendship, and also we defined what is a true friend and the importance of having them for our development. Today, we are going to talk about loving our enemies, which is, as we know, the opposite of a friend. So we are going to talk about this concept of opposites, and we'll see if an enemy is really an opposite of a friend or not. And let's us start with a recap of what is friendship. So we talked about this a few weeks ago. I think it was 4 weeks ago. So what is the definition of friendship? From what we can see in the Spiritist literature, what we find is friendship is in the gradation of human feelings. Sincere friendship is very much the oasis of rest for the walker of life on their journey of improvement, who knows how to be a true friend and always the emissary of, of bliss and peace, enlisting in the ranks of Jesus' disciples by the natural illumination of the Spirit, who, conquering the widest sympathies between the incarnate and the good entities of the invisible, knows how to radiate the vibrations of purifying feelings everywhere. To have friendship is to have a heart that loves and clarifies, that understands and forgives in the most bitter hours of life. Jesus is the divine friend of humanity. Let us know how to understand his sublime affection, and we will transform our affective environments into an ocean of perennial peace and consolation. So this we find in the book The Consoler, O Consolador, in Portuguese, question 174, Espiritual Manual, psychographed by Chico Xavier. So, as we said before, is an enemy an opposite of all of this? And the answer is yes and no. And you will understand it better during the talk. For today's talk, I have used mainly the Gospel according to Spiritism and the Spirit's book. So I'm going to touch on the parts that I found the information that I'm going to share. But in the Gospel according to Spiritism, particularly chapter 12, we have a lot of explanations about this concept. The chapter is actually called Loving Our Enemies. So Kardec dedicates a whole chapter to this topic so we can understand how to deal with it. And in the introduction of this chapter, Kardec explains that he tried to approach Jesus' teachings in a way that one maximum could be deducted from the one before. And interestingly enough, the chapter before is loving our neighbor or loving one's neighbor as oneself. So Kardec explains at the beginning of chapter 12 that if love towards one's neighbor is the principle of, or the principle of charity, loving one's enemies is its sublime application. For such a virtue is one of the greatest victories attainable over selfishness and pride. In Matthew 43, versicle 5, for item 5, versicle 43 to 45, you find this saying, "You have learned that it was said, 'You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemies.' But I say to you, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who persecute you and malign you, so that you may be children of your Father who is in heaven, who makes the sun rise on the good and on the evil, and the rain fall on the just and on the unjust." So this is Jesus teaching, and I'd like to break this down and try to tackle it bit by bit so we can understand better this passage and what Jesus wanted to say to us according to the spiritualist literature. So let's start with this part. Where does this initial part come from? When Jesus mentioned, "You have learned you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemies." This law, we understand, was disseminated during Moses' time, and proof of its existence was found in the Dead Sea manuscripts that were classified as the community rule, where it reads, "You must love those who have been chosen and hate those whom God has rejected." And here we find one of the first definitions of what is an enemy. So what is an enemy? Who is the enemy and who is the neighbor? We interpret the enemy as those who are different from us, and the neighbor as those who share our ideas, our opinions. So in the ecumenical translation of the Bible, there is an explanation note in relation to this passage to say that it is probably an enemy of the religious community of that time. So it is not any enemy. It's one who did not believe in the unique God as they believed. Those who did not follow the law or did not believe in the law they followed. But Jesus challenges that and tries to establish a new order. And he goes on to say, "But I say to you, love your enemies." So if we take the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 12, as I mentioned, and if we go to item 3, we see there, Kardec writes, "However, there is usually a misunderstanding as to the meaning of the word love in this context. Jesus did not mean by these words that one must have for one's enemy the tenderness that one would have for a brother, sister, or friend. Love presupposes trust, and we could not trust someone who we know means us harm. We could not have the same effusion of friendship with such a person, knowing that he or she is capable of abusing it. Among persons who distrust one another, the bonds of affinity cannot be the same as those that exist among those who are in communion of thought. Finally, one can feel the same pleasure upon meeting an enemy that one feels upon meeting a friend." Furthermore, this sentiment results from a physical law, the law of assimilation and repulsion of fluids. So here, there's a very interesting concept here. So this sentiment results from a physical law, the law of assimilation and repulsion of fluids. A malevolent thought emits a fluidic current whose impression is painful. A benevolent thought envelops you in a pleasant emanation. Hence the difference in sensations one experiences when close to a friend or an enemy. To love one's enemies, therefore, cannot mean that one should not make a difference between them and one's friends. This precept seems difficult, even impossible to practice, only because people have wrongly believed that it prescribes giving friends and enemies the same place in their hearts. Since the poverty of human language forces us to use the same term to express the various nuances of sentiments, reason calls us to differentiate them according to each case. So here Kardec makes a distinction between a friend and an enemy in the sense that, first of all, there is much more involved to it and things that we actually can't really see. So these fluids that we emanate, they have such a power that we can make impressions in another person, even not knowing it or even not wanting it. Sometimes we do it even when we don't want to do it. But we kind of emanate this that we could call, to simplify, we could call bad energy. So we send it to another person and we receive it as well. So it's hard to love someone the same way, someone that sends us this bad energy, the same way as we love someone that sends us good energy, that we see this loving loving sentiment towards us. It's not the same thing and it's difficult, but we are going to learn how to deal with these things and a little bit of why this happens. So if we take the Spirit's book and if we go to question 887, it says that Kardec asks the spirits, Jesus also taught, love even your enemies. But isn't loving our enemies contrary to our natural tendencies? And doesn't enmity proceed from a lack of sympathy between spirits? And the answer from the spirits is, it is obviously not possible to show tender and passionate love toward one's enemies. And that is not what Jesus wanted to say. Loving one's enemies means to forgive them and to return good for their evil. That is how we put ourselves above them. By seeking vengeance, we only place ourselves beneath them. So this is a very interesting answer and kind of completes the comments or the explanation from Kardec in the Gospel According to Spiritism. So if we go back to the Gospel According to Spiritism and continue there, we can see here Kardec saying, just find, to love one's enemies, therefore, does not mean holding for them an affection that is not natural, since contact with an enemy makes the heart beat in a much different way than does contact with a friend. It means holding neither hatred, rancor, nor desires for vengeance against them. It means forgiving them unconditionally and without ulterior motives. for the evil they have caused us. It means not setting up any obstacles to reconciliation. It means wanting the good for them instead of wishing them evil. It means rejoicing instead of despairing for the good that reached them. It means extending to them a helping hand in anything in case of necessity. It means abstaining either in word or act from anything that might harm them. Finally, it means repaying their evil with good in everything with no intention of humiliating them. However, this fulfills the conditions of the commandment, love your enemies. So that's what Jesus wanted to teach us. That's what he wanted to say when he said, love your enemies. He didn't say we should be good friends with them. We should invite them for a lunch in our house. You could if you want. But what Jesus is really saying here is we need to forgive and we need to behave not in the same way as them. And that is the most important part here, I would say, because we are only responsible for the acts that we do. So if you do the same as your enemy, then you become the same. And that's you don't want that. Because why would you do the same thing that you condemn? And you also are you are engaged, if we can say like that, with your own improvement. And that's what you want. So you want to improve. And if you want to improve, you want to do the things that will get you there. And behaving the same way as your enemy won't help you in this path. So we can continue here in the gospel according to Spiritism. If we go to item 4, Kardec continues, loving one's enemies is absurd to disbelievers, those for whom the present life is everything. See in their enemies only noxious beings who disturb their peace of mind, and from whom they believe only death can free them. Hence the desire for vengeance. They have no interest in forgiving unless it is to satisfy their pride in the eyes of the world. In certain cases, forgiveness even seems to them like a weakness unworthy of them. Even if they do not seek outright revenge, they nevertheless harbor rancor and a secret desire for evil. For believers, and especially for spiritists, the way of seeing things is different because they consider both the past and the future, between which their present life is only a dot. They do that because of the very destiny of the earth. They must expect to meet up with evil and perverse people, that the weakness of which they are the target makes up part of the trials they must undergo, and their elevated point of view renders the vicissitudes less bitter whether they come from things or other people. If they do not complain about their trials, they must not murmur against those who serve as their instruments. If instead of complaining, they thank God for putting them to the test, they should thank the hand that furnishes them the opportunity to prove their patience and resignation. This thought naturally disposes them to forgiveness. Moreover, they feel that the more generous they are, the more uplifted they are in their own eyes, and they find themselves to be beyond the reach of malevolent attacks from their enemies. So this chapter is really good. Kardec is very succinct, but very straight to the point as well. And he shows us this sense of future, because we spiritists, we believe that life goes on, and we know that um, everything that we do, if we do good, it's very good for our improvement, but if we do bad, we are contracting this debt. So it doesn't matter who initiated it. The point is, if you do it, you're also responsible. And because we see the big picture, we see beyond this life. We don't take things considering only this transitory, this momentaneous situation that we are in. Because if we think like that, then we would have a different behavior towards our enemies. We would seek vengeance. We would make them pay. But we think different. We think about being good and doing good for our own good and for the good of everyone. So then, coming back to the passage, do good to those who hate you. So the good spirits do good to those who hate them, just to obey to a divine law or to please God. As we were saying, no, it is not to please God. They do it because they understand that when they don't love their enemy, they put themselves in a situation of suffering. How many times we don't carry that heart, that resentment, which destroys our existence, and we can't forgive, we can't forget, not from the point of view of memory, but letting the other settle with the divine loss and continue living our lives. And when the enemy looks for us again, we have enough clean and pure heart so that we can offer our hand. So if you go to the Spirit's book, question 391, does the antipathy between two individuals arise first in the one whose spirit is worse, or in the other whose spirit is better? And the answer from the Spirit is, it arises in both, but the causes and effects are different. A bad spirit feels antipathy towards anyone who may be able to judge and unmask it. Upon seeing a person for the first time, it perceives that that person will disapprove of it. Its dislike then changes into hatred and envy, which inspire it with a desire to do bad things. The good spirit, on the other hand, is repulsed by the bad one because it knows the other will not understand it and that neither shares the same sentiments. However, aware of its higher moral principles, it feels neither hatred nor jealousy toward the other. It is content to simply avoid and pity it. So persons who occupy elevated positions in the world do not feel offended by the insults of those whom they regard as their inferiors. The same applies in the moral world for those who lift themselves above materialistic humanity. They understand that hate and rancor degrade and debase them. Therefore, to be above their adversaries, they must have a bigger, nobler, and more generous soul. The word's prejudice concerning what has conventionally been called the point of honor causes that somber susceptibility that is born from pride and the exaltation of the personality, leading people to pay back injury for injury, offense for offense, in what seems like justice for those whose moral sense has not risen. above the earthly passions. That is why the Mosaic law stated an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, a law that was in harmony with the time in which Moses lived. But Christ came and said, repay evil with goodness. And stated further, do not resist the evil that others might want to do to you. If someone strikes you your right cheek, offer the other also. So to the proud, this maxim seems like cowards, because they do not understand that there is more courage in bearing an offense than in avenging oneself. And they always base their actions on motives that keep them from seeing beyond the present. Only faith in the future, life, provides the strength that bear patiently the blows directly against our interests and self-centeredness. That is why we constantly state, focus your gaze on the future ahead. The more you lift yourselves above the material life through thought, the less you'll be disheartened by things on the earth. Jesus lived this passage so that on the cross, his last words were to intercede with the Father to ease the misunderstanding of those who have been wrong in that situation. So in Luke 23, we find this passage when Jesus says, Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. So Jesus were not offended at all. He knew what was going on and he could see beyond. He just prayed for those who were doing that because he understood that it was bad for them to do what they were doing. This is really powerful and it's so beautiful. We are not Jesus yet. We'll be one day so perfect as him, hopefully. But we can start today trying with small actions to be more like him. So let us love our enemies who challenge us to do good, to exercise renunciation, to work on patience, and to carry out charity. But we must be cautious against enemies hidden within ourselves, which expressing feelings unworthy of our knowledge and of our evolution enslave us to anguish and handcuff us to pain, closing our lives in misery and disturbance. So let's take those things from inside of us so we can be free. And continuing, and pray for those who persecute and malign you. So he tells us to pray for those who persecute us. A prayer represents that deepest point of connection between the creature and the creator. The prayer defines a new element of communication in which someone looking for the movement of the prayer, activating the intimate implements in favor of the other, or those who persecute them. They can already untie that animosity, because if facing an opponent we have an antipathy, a repulsion of the energy and magnetism, now using a prayer they could qualify their energy and create a compass for approach. So prayer would be the technique that create or would be the technique, the first movement of approaching the other, so that by visiting the other in your thinking and emitting light, when facing physically, that energetic structure so dense would not exist. So when sometimes we don't know what to do, and we have this strong feeling against somebody, we should get in a position of um, opening our hearts and our minds and praying praying for them and also praying for yourself, because if you're feeling all of those things, you also need help. So let's pray for all involved, and let's pray for this sentiment, this energy to be dissolved. That is the most important thing, especially to free yourself from that combination of fluids, because if you also participating. So if you go to the Spirit's book, question 531, Kardec asks, in the rancor of the people that have harmed us on earth, is the rancor of the people that have harmed us on earth extinguished with their corporeal life? And the answer from the spirits is, they often realize the injustice and the wrong they have done, but if God allows them, they will continue to pursue you in their hatred in order to test you further. And then Kardec continues, is there a way to put an end to it? And if so, by what means? And the answer is, yes, by praying for them and by paying back their evil with good. That way, they will end up comprehending their errors. In all cases, if you know how to place yourselves above their schemes, they will seize them upon seeing they have gained nothing from them. So basically, what Kardec and the spirits are saying here is, if you act in a different way, your enemies won't know what to do with it. So if you're good to them, they'll think, what's going on here? That is not the answer that I was expecting. That's not the reaction that I was hoping for. I wanted to tease you, and now you're behaving like this. What's wrong with you? So in a certain way, you're breaking that cycle, and then eventually this whole thing will dissolve, and your enemy or this person or this spirit will understand that it cannot do anything anymore, and even if it does it won't affect you. So what's the point? So it's the best way of breaking this cycle, and because we don't want this to go forever. As it's explaining here in this question, it could go for a long time, and even for many incarnations. And we don't want to have this thing going on forever, or for too much time. It's not in the interest of anybody involved to continue. So that you may be children of your Father who is in heaven. There are two interesting points here. For one, Jesus brings this notion of God Father, God great, God just, God good. So if God is the Father of us all and we are his children, we are naturally brothers, regardless of beliefs, regardless of any eventual differences, and we must love each other like brothers. Then Jesus raises the standard a little when he says, the enemy, what you consider as an enemy, is actually your brother, because the Father is only one. And there's also another important point here to prove true when Jesus says we are brothers, because usually you are indifferent to those who you don't establish a relationship with. You don't become an enemy of someone to whom you don't have a bond with. You usually become an enemy of someone who was once a friend, so the relationship falls ill. So there is an interaction between people who for some reason breaks with this interaction, this friendship. In other words, same as hate is not the opposite of love, the opposite of love is indifference. So an enemy is not the opposite of a friend. It is actually the result of a friendship that becomes ill. So this is important to understand. We are all brothers. We came from the same God. And then finally, who makes the sun rise on the good and on the evil, and the rain fall on the just and the unjust. In this passage, Jesus evokes the Creator's own magnitude, the creative situation, making it rain for the just and the unjust, making the sun rise for all, so that feeling that we addresses only to those who share our ideas, who agrees with us in human, or who agrees with us, um, but the love has to be. So we have this feeling for only the people that agrees to us, but this love has to be divine. Of course, it won't materialize. You will not operationalize in the same way as you would towards a friend. But the feeling that moves you cannot be a feeling of difference. And that is what Spiritism will show us. We know that we are all spirits, children of the same Creator, destined to the same degree of perfection. That is a difference. The difference is at most transitory. And in the Spirit's book, question 319, Kardec asks, is instinctive antipathy always a sign of a bad nature? And the answer from the spirits is, true spirits are not necessarily bad just because they are not sympathetic. Antipathy may originate from dissimilarity in their way of thinking. As they evolve, however, these shades of dissimilarity are erased and the antipathy disappears. So the more we understand that we are the same, the more those things will lose importance. So spiritists have yet other reason for being tolerant with their enemies. They know that weakness weakness is not a permanent state for humans. That it is due to a momentary imperfection, and that just as children correct themselves of their faults, evil people will someday acknowledge their wrongs and become good. So now, just to finalize, if we go to the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 12 again, item 5, Kardec says, oh, sorry, not here, here. Spiritists have yet other reasons. They also know that death frees them only from the physical presence of their enemies, and that their enemies can pursue them with their hatred even after having left the earth behind, that their vengeance thus fails in its objective, and to the contrary, has the effect of causing a greater anger, and that can continue from one existence to the next. It is Spiritism's responsibility to show through experience that the law that governs the relations between the visible and invisible worlds, that the expression extinguish hatred with blood is radically erroneous, and that what is in fact the truth is that blood preserves hatred even beyond the grave. Consequently, Spiritism must present a positive reason and a practical usefulness for forgiveness, and Christ's sublime maxim, love your enemies, there is no heart so perverse that it would not be touched by good behavior, even without being conscious of it. Through good conduct, one removes at the least any pretext for reprisals, and can turn enemies into friends both before and after his or her death. Through bad behavior, we injure them, And it is then that they serve as instruments of God's justice for punishing those who have not forgiven. So, if you have love, you will know how to cultivate good at every moment to overcome evil at every hour. And you will realize then, as the Christ lashed on the cross, that your most persecuted persecutors are only children of short understanding and sick sensitivity, that it is necessary to understand and help, forgive and serve always, so that the glory of pure love, even in the torments of death, lift up the imperishable spirit to the blessing of eternal life. So Spiritism brings us the clarification that the responsibility that we have is to practice love. But what about the evil that exists in the world? Well, do not worry about it. God has His intervention mechanisms. He does not need us. He does not need our hands to harm anyone. He needs us to preserve what is good and what is pure. And when Jesus says, "You are the light of the world and the salt of the earth," the light must shine where there is shadow, and the salt is to preserve what is good, highlight the flavor. So this is our role. We should leave the rest to the Creator, as He is able to intervene, to correct the direction without us having to do it for Him. We wouldn't be able to do it for Him even if we wanted. So we should not assume more responsibility than we should. Because a lot of times we assume those responsibilities and we forget our own responsibilities. So if you do our part, and if everyone does their own parts, then everything will be solved. So I just want to finalize with this passage from Luke 6, verses 32-36. If you love only those who love you, what reward will you have? Since even sinners also love those who love them. And if you do good only to those who do good to you, what reward will you have? Since even sinners do the same thing. And if you lend only to those from whom you can expect the same favor, what reward will you have? Since even sinners lend to each other in order to receive the same advantage. But as for you, love your enemies, do good to all, and lend without expecting anything. And then your reward will be very great, and you'll be children of the Most High, who is good to integrate and even the wicked. Thus, the full of mercy, just as your God is full of mercy. Be full of mercy, just as your God is full of mercy. And that is why Kardec says that loving one's enemies is the sublime application of the law of charity, the greatest victory attainable over selfishness and pride, because loving one's friends, anyone can do, but loving your enemies will lift you closer to God. So I want to end up here. And let me just check if there's any questions. No, I don't see any questions. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. I see some comments here. Thank you very much for everyone around the world. I can see people here from the US. I see people from Brazil, here in Ireland. Thank you so much for being here, guys. We really appreciate having this conversation with you. Those things, they're not my own words. I just researched them, and as you saw, I read basically the Spirit's book and the Gospel according to Spiritism, which is it's our most complete source of information. So it's always good to go there and see what they have to say to us. So I just wanted to end, as we always, just to kind of say that, as we always do, if you are struggling, if you have any problems, if you need some help, here in Ireland, there is the website yourmentalhealth.ie, but you can access it from anywhere. And if you are here, you can also text them to 08618000280. I think I have it here. Yeah, this is the website. Yeah. There's also the Irish Council for Psychotherapy. So the website is psychotherapycouncil.ie. There's also the Samaritans as well. The helpline is 116123. And there's a service as well that is free to anyone, that you can just text them, and it's available 24/7. That the number is 50808. And you can also send us a message. We have our fraternal gathering. So our email is fraternalgatheringdublin@gmail.com. If you need anything, or if you want to talk to us, send us an email. I'll be happy to talk to you. So, just as I mentioned before, love your enemies and drive them nuts, because if you're loving towards them, they won't understand it. And the bibliography, as I mentioned, this is the bibliography that I use, but mainly the Spirit's book and the Gospel according to Spiritism. Our activities, we have our public meetings in the form of lives for now, every Sunday, as you know, because you're here, from 11:15 a.m. to around 12:15 p.m. We also have our talk shows in the form of lives for now, every Tuesday and Thursday at 7:15 p.m. We have our study groups every Wednesday from 8 to 9. And if you want to participate, just send us an email, and we are going to give you all the instructions. We do it via Zoom. So this is, if you, I'm not sure if you can see there, but it's very small, but it's also here in the presentation. So our email is spiritismisland@gmail.com. So just send us an email. We are going to send you all the instructions so you can also participate. And that was all for me, guys. Thank you so much again for being here. I will end up with our final prayer. So if you want to, please close your eyes. Or if not, just raise your thoughts to Jesus, to our spiritual friends, to our mentors, to God. And once more, let's us thank God for this morning, for all these learnings, for everything that He does for us, for everything that Jesus does for us, for everything that our spiritual friends do for us. And a special thanks to our mentors. They have a lot of work with us. I don't know if you guys are like me, they're very busy. So let's just thank them. We really appreciate them being with us and helping us every day in every struggle that we have in our lives, but also in our good moments. So thank you so much again for everything. So be it. Okay. So thank you so much again, guys. I hope you have a wonderful Sunday and you enjoy the day, get some rest, and see the people that you love. And we see each other again next time. Thank you again. Bye.